Swinson.
Thank you very much, Mr Cummings. And I would like to start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Bournemouth East in securing this debate, and of course very timely it is too. He opened the debate in a thorough and well-informed way, and obviously has some experience in this with his military background, and particularly poignantly through his own personal experience of the tragedy and the way that terrorism has touched his own family, which I think is a particularly sober reminder to us all here of the gravity of what we're dealing with. We're at a critical point in the history of Pakistan, and events are unfolding very quickly. Not long ago, there was talk of the political endgame being in sight in the form of a potential power-sharing deal between Benazir Bhutto and Pervez Musharraf, and now sadly we're looking to the future with greater uncertainty. The events of the past just 4 months have seen the return from exile of Ms Bhutto, the imposing then lifting of a state of emergency, the swearing in of Mr Musharraf as a civilian president, then of course the seismic events of the assassination of Benazir Bhutto and the postponement of the parliamentary elections to February, just next month. So today's debate is taking place on ground that is shifting and will remain turbulent for some time to come. But nevertheless, we must continue to discuss and scrutinise government policy as we pursue the goal of a democratic and stable Pakistan. I'd like to pick up various points in my remarks today. Obviously, the importance of holding free and fair elections in Pakistan next month. I also want to touch on the investigation that is taking place into the death of Benazir Bhutto, and then looking at issues of development aid, training of terrorists, perhaps sometimes UK citizens in Pakistan, and longer-term issues of development and good governance. I'm sure on the 27th of December, while the House was risen on its Christmas break, we were all horrified to hear the news of the assassination of Benazir Bhutto. And for me, the personal thought was that just a few months ago, last autumn, in Glasgow, Benazir Bhutto had visited and held a meeting in one of the hotels in the city where various elected representatives and community leaders of the Muslim community in Glasgow had been invited. And I attended that event, and I remember listening to the speech that she gave, eloquent and confident, and with a real note of optimism and hope. And at this point, she hadn't yet got back to Pakistan. There certainly wasn't any certainty that she would, but in listening to her comments, it did seem that there may well be an optimistic future ahead if things could be made to work in that troubled country. And it seems so shocking to go from a civilised and an interesting meeting in a hotel in Glasgow to suddenly be watching on the news just a few short months later to see of the assassination of this politician. I think there is clearly uncertainty about the facts of how she died. One report will say it's a suicide bomber, somebody else will say it's a gunman. We had that strange story about the sunroof in there as well. And obviously, in a politically sensitive time within a country like Pakistan, this is causing huge concern and suspicion over whether the facts are indeed being covered up. The lack of post-mortem, understandably, at the request of her husband, has not helped that situation, and indeed the hosing down of the scene of the attack just a few short hour and a half after it happened have certainly not helped to allay those suspicions. That's why it's very welcome to see that there is a team from Scotland Yard in Pakistan to assist with the investigation. But given the sensitivity of this issue and getting the facts straight, what's important is not just the quality of the investigation, which certainly the Scotland Yard detectives will be invaluable for, but it also is the perception of the investigation, and it needs to be perceived to be independent. Therefore, I think, and there are wide calls for, a UN investigation into the death of Benazir Bhutto would help to give that perception of independence and some confidence for the people of Pakistan that the real causes will actually be investigated and looked at and not in any way covered up. There's precedent for this, obviously, with the death of Rafiq Hariri in Lebanon in 2004, and so I'd be interested whether or not the government would, whether the Minister would indicate the government's support for such a UN investigation, and whether that could be something we would press for internationally. The Honourable Member for Braintree highlighted the importance of, Banbury, sorry, too many B's in the constituencies, highlighted the importance of democracy, democracy, democracy. And obviously the most important and pressing issue for the UK is to do everything that we can to ensure that the elections next month are free and fair. The short delay in the elections, I think, is welcome, and it was inevitable, and if such events took place in our own country shortly before a scheduled general election, then no doubt there would be a similar delay, and such a postponement is certainly fair enough within a democracy. We can still hope for stable parliamentary elections, which could result in a peaceful and fair result and a step forward for the country. But the EU monitoring mission is going to be crucial to ensure that these elections are conducted properly. On the 7th of January, the Secretary of State was positive about the number of election monitors who would be going to Pakistan. But he didn't, perhaps at that time, have the actual numbers to hand. He said that there may be an increase up to about 100. I wonder if the Minister today would be able to inform us of an update on the figures of how many will be going from the EU, and indeed what Britain will be doing to make sure that we support and resource additional monitors who will surely be needed in these circumstances with very much heightened tension. On the issue also of the judiciary, when Musharraf suspended and fired key judges, that clearly was a great blow to the institutions of the country. And if the judiciary has been put in place by Musharraf, then the elections are going to certainly struggle to be seen to be free and fair. So I hope the government will be pushing Musharraf to reinstate the members of the judiciary who were suspended or fired to the rules, so that the rest of the country can have some confidence that this independent judiciary can actually scrutinise the parliamentary elections. I would also be interested to hear from the Minister what representations this government has made back in November when Musharraf did decide to suspend and fire key judges, because clearly this was a bad omen for what was to come within the country. The Honourable Member for Bournemouth East spoke well on the issue of the training camps, which are indeed a real problem within the country. But he was also right to talk about tackling the problem at home. Indeed, I think he used the phrase that until 2005 we had been in some way in denial about the reality of the fact that some of our own British citizens, born and bred and educated and immersed in our own society here, could actually do such unspeakable and horrific things. This is something that we as a country do need to grapple with. We do need to make sure that we have programmes in place and initiatives to try and reach out to those who may be disaffected and perhaps vulnerable to the types of extremist rhetoric which can lead people down that path. We also need to look from an intelligence point of view at the traffic, as it were, of people between Britain and Pakistan. Obviously, there are many hundreds of thousands of British citizens who have Pakistani origin living here in the UK, and as a result, they are often many people going back to Pakistan each year. I think 415,000 British citizens going to Pakistan every year. And of these, it is a very small minority who will be lured into the training camps there. But we do need to make sure we focus on that small minority through our intelligence services and make sure that we can have the procedures in place to halt anything that they may be planning. I think it is important to pick up the point that the Honourable Member for Braintree did make, that it is a very small minority, and in fact there is a great deal of anger in the Muslim community, and certainly in my constituency, and I'm sure in other members as well. And I think the phrase hijacking was used, that there is this feeling that the peaceful religion of Islam is being hijacked by people with extreme political views, and the version that they spout has absolutely bears no resemblance to the religion that Muslims follow peacefully within Britain today, and I think it is important to make that point. The government has a variety of initiatives, and I believe in the past 10-point plans to tackle this issue of homegrown terrorism, and obviously changing the mindset of any British citizens who are not feeling loyalty to the values of our country has got to be a priority. So I hope the Minister might perhaps be able to report back on the success so far of these initiatives, and perhaps what lessons have been learned of what doesn't work and what changes will be made in the future as a result of that. Turning to what can be done in Pakistan itself, I think the Honourable Member for Banbury was quite right to focus on the issue of poverty and deprivation. We know that that is a great breeding ground for terrorism, and clearly he has a great knowledge of the country itself. It certainly is key to getting to grips with this issue. Pakistan obviously has been a key ally in the war on terror, but the development support that we give is crucial to making sure that we get success. The human development of Pakistan is a long-term policy for making the world a safer place, improving education, reducing poverty. This will also reduce extremism and even hopefully stabilise the Northwest Frontier Province, where obviously there is perhaps the most intensive problem with terrorism and Al-Qaeda. Of course, reducing conflict and instability in this area will have a knock-on effect on stability in Afghanistan, where we also have a particular interest with our troops there at the moment. But education has to be the key cornerstone of this work, in particular in terms of stopping people from going to madrasas. I would be interested if the government has any plans in place to assist with expanding state education in Pakistan, because this is not available in many parts of the country, and obviously where that is not the case, then there is a void, as it were, into which others who wish to indoctrinate young people in Pakistan can step into. It's obviously important that Pakistan also has strong political and legal institutions, and this has certainly been undermined by the Musharraf regime. Corruption is rife. Obviously, we've touched on the issue of the judiciary and the suspension of key individuals there. I would be interested to know what the government is doing to build up these institutions to help democracy to get a real foothold in Pakistan, because free and fair elections will only be able to produce a stable government if it's backed up by these solid institutions, particularly in the longer term. And similarly, there needs to be links with the political parties, civil society, and indeed even the military to have that political leverage to get people round the table and working together. And hopefully the Minister will be able to update on that issue. But I would be interested to know how critical the government has been, perhaps privately, of Musharraf, because sometimes it is seen to perhaps not be as critical as we might have liked, particularly when there have been those instances of the suspension of the judiciary, for example. And while clearly Pakistan has been an ally in the so-called war on terror, if that comes at the expense of stronger condemnation of actions in Pakistan that are likely to destabilise that country, that will only fan the flames of terrorism further and therefore be contrary to the objective. I'd just like to flag one further concern with the Minister. News reports of the US response to the situation in Pakistan have suggested that CIA activity on the borders has been intensifying, with a possible view to unilateral US action in Pakistan. I hope the Minister will be firm in condemning any such suggestions of unilateral action. We clearly need to learn from previous mistakes in foreign policy and act as a coherent international community through proper international institutions. And I would hope the UK would be strongly counselling the US against any such action and under no circumstances supporting it. In conclusion, Mr Cummings, there is a clearly volatile and dangerous situation in Pakistan. And given the links to the terrorist training camps and organisations in that country, this can have a real impact on security here in the UK and globally. It is clear that free and fair elections are vital to unlocking this problem, that in terms of the confidence of people in Pakistan, the death of Benazir Bhutto must be properly investigated, and I would argue for a UN investigation into that. Here at home, the UK must intensify and step up action to prevent homegrown terrorists, and abroad, look at the development aid and support for Pakistani democratic, judicial and educational institutions. Then I hope, Mr Cummings, we can all look forward and hope to peaceful elections on the 18th of February and a step forward for democracy in Pakistan. And the government must obviously use every effort to influence the various stakeholders internationally to achieve that outcome. It will no doubt be a long process, and I'm sure we will return to this issue before very long in this House.
Keith Swinson.